Hi, welcome. On this video, as part of my series of videos on the relational dog training approach, I'm going to be talking about the process itself, beginning to identify, what is training, what does it represent, and how to begin to move beyond appearances, begin to gain insight into the depth of what training really represents for the dog and owner, those who are struggling to overcome behavior issues and problems. And one of the things when I look at, again, coming to where I'm at now in terms of approaching training as a relational changing process, is looking back on my own journey, a couple, kind of forks in the road with, really being able to put this together piece by piece, comes from really self-auditing. Really, and part of that process is with my journey as a police canine officer, was really coming to really a peak of that relationship and being very successful in that, but then being able to look back on that and ask questions as to, well, how did I get to where I'm at? What was it about? Was it about, certain devices? Was it about, the process? What does that represent? How was I able to achieve that with this type of a dog and that type of a level? And that's part of, the ability to gain insight is through a part of that journey. Honestly, it's really important to have that, to be able to use that as a baseline, so to speak, to be able to, figure some of these dynamics out as to these various little twists and turns. Again, in these videos, I'm going to navigate people through these, just so people can understand exactly what the process is and how to achieve results, how to really move beyond failure, the struggles people have with their dogs, and be able to, gain a high level, of what the real standard is. And again, I'm going to talk about that. But again, going back to, these forks in the road where you begin to look at, the process or ask questions about, what is training, comes from, looking at things with a very discerning eye, with a objective view, and apply at the same time critical thinking to be able to, put or connect these dots together in such a way that's going to allow you to move beyond, what just appearances, beyond the surface of things. And so when I talk about appearances, this is again one of these contradictions that anybody who has experience with dog training or training dogs will encounter. And what that is this type of a disconnect from the training environment, where the dog will be moving around in the various, responding, going into the various positions that are defined as meaningful. But even though the dog is doing that, and perhaps the dog owner is getting their certificate, and all those good things are happening from within the training environment, however, be disconnected from the behavior issues in terms of diminishment of unwanted behavior, which means that the dog and owner are still continuing to struggle with behavior issues even after they've been successful within the training programs. And this is very, very common. This is one of the things that really years ago I started keying up on when I was helping people. I was getting the same people. I was getting, if you look at these patterns, you start to connect these dots with personality types of people, you'll see it. But the people that were coming to me for help were continuing to come from these systems of training that promote training as a learning-based exercise and incentivize the dog, so it's a position-based type of narrative where it's all about the positions and defining that, It's making these assumptions that it represents a like-minded state of the dog based off of how the dog would respond. And looking at that, saying, okay, well, that's not. There's something wrong here in that picture, clearly, because all these people are their backs are up against the wall, and then as I was again start applying my method, okay, start to approach it not on a position based narrative, but on a interaction based type of approach with how I frame the picture up. You start to see exactly the consistency of that. Start to see, okay, there is a major problem here, and be able to narrow down, really identify the process that way. Be able to say, okay, this is about changing how people think. Okay, the specifics of the method itself, the language it speaks, defining. Even when I was looking at, laying out the roadmap, being able to understand, the importance of the methodology itself, the specifics of it, with how it defines change. I mean, that's a really important thing about training. Beyond, here's the thing, beyond the concept of just of leadership, because again, the importance of promoting a certain idea of things, that can only take you so far if the methodology itself isn't lining up. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about in these videos, why it is that there's no kind of room to maneuver once you understand how the dog, how it packages up, how change is defined through the method itself. It has to hold true to what it is. I mean, that's a real important point as I go through this and explain this, the process, and then help people understand it, beginning for people to understand. But here's the problem, and again, I'm going to talk about this too in my series of videos about how it is this has become very difficult in society for on a training level for people based on their expectations, how their expectations have been set up a certain way within what their expectations are for training, about what they expect things to happen and go down a certain way. That also creates issues for people. But again, it's kind of like it's connected both ways between trainers and the public. Certain expectations have been set up through what the process, how people define the process, as either a full-blown learning-based exercise or some sort of a middle-of-the-road exercise through balanced training concept. Again, through the series of videos, I'm going to be talking about these concepts of balanced training in more detail as to what is balanced training. But again, the purpose of this video here, part one, is really just to start to identify the problem as to how it is that the picture itself doesn't always line up. And then, once you come to that crossroads, that fork in the road, whether you choose to step back and this is an important point, ask a serious questions about that, to say, okay, are we missing something here? Is something, this isn't lining up, or is it the fault of the dog? I mean, and what's happened, unfortunately, is that people have displaced the blame, or tried to, instead of looking at the process itself and what is the process, they've they're looking at things within a very narrow kind of view, so to speak, and they're not willing to kind of let go of of their thinking. They're not willing to make a trade-off, and that's an important point. So anyway, just something to think about as I go move forward. I'm actually on the next part. I'm going to talk about the process itself beyond just the formalized process. Okay, to help you understand that that you're more than a process. I talk about becoming the system. That's an important point. Is is it just about an approach, or is it about the relationship? So anyway, thanks for watching, and I encourage you to tune in to part two.